The IEA recommended the 200 basis point increase in the policy rate. The Bank of Ghana has announced 250 basis points. Now, the reason why you made this recommendation is for it to increase the attractiveness of the Cedi denominated assets to stem disinvestment from the money and capital market and the negative effect on the Cedi. How about how this would also impact on the cost of credit? Okay, so now that the policy rate has gone up, and already even when it went down, it did not impact on the interests that the private sector and individuals pay on the loans that we take from the banks.
Yeah.
Now that it's gone up, is that not also going to make cost of credit expensive?
Of course. You see, every policy measure action that you take will affect somebody negatively and another section, positively. Every single measure that you can mention, okay? I personally have been fighting for interest rates to come down in this country, forever. You do get me?
Yes.
So it is not out of, I'm not enthused in suggesting that, interest rates should go back up again. But in the circumstances, you see, when you have inflation reaching, 15.7%,
Yes.
it has already exceeded the policy rate. Okay? In normal circumstances, the policy rate should always be above inflation, so that at least you have a real policy rate buffer. Okay? Especially in our jurisdiction, if you go to other countries, it could be negative. Right. But here, so the Bank of Ghana itself realizes that we have fallen behind the inflation. Okay? And that is why they have seen it necessary to raise the policy rate above the inflation rate. Okay?
That's right.
Now, that is how the inflation targeting framework that they are applying, that is how it works. Okay? You fight inflation through policy rate, the interest rates. Okay?
Right.
But it also means that it can have negative consequences on the economy in terms of growth. We know that.
Absolutely.
So when you are taking that decision, you see, you balance the risks between growth and inflation. They must have done that. The Monetary Policy Committee meeting, I also listened to them. The governor seems to be saying that we are more comfortable with the growth side. If you look at the figures that are coming from Ghana Statistical Service and so on.
Right.
But inflation has become a critical issue now. So that is where we should go. And then also, you see, you can use the interest rate, one policy measure to fight two objectives. That is, you are going after inflation. You are also going after the exchange rate.
But I'm thinking about it. See, the drivers of the inflation, as per the Ghana Statistical Service own data, was food, electricity, transportation. So these are the major areas that according to the Ghana Statistical Service, inflation rose over the period.
Yes.
So if you look at agric, for instance, the subsidy has been reduced to about 15%. What that means is that clearly the farmer would have to now incur more cost in producing foodstuff onto the market, which directly influences the price at which we're going to be buying. Fuel prices affect everything on the market, including foodstuff.
Yeah.
And as we're seeing now, transport fares may go up if the government doesn't intervene because of the increase in the price of petroleum products at the pumps.
Yeah.
So the various drivers of the inflation still are not seeing any specific interventions to cushion the Ghanaian. So we're not going to see an end to the rise in inflation anytime soon, is it?
Yeah, I totally agree with your analysis of the drivers of inflation and maybe the best way to tackle the problem. I have done that kind of disaggregation, and I've said, inflation is both a demand driven and then also supply driven. In our type of economy, the supply side influence may even be bigger. As you are saying, food alone carries almost 44% of the CPI basket.
Absolutely.
That should tell you that whatever happens to food has a major effect on our headline inflation.
That's right.
Okay, And then also, as you have said, fuel prices, they also feed into almost everything, including food and transportation and so on. Okay.
That's right.
And that is why some of us have said that when you are fighting inflation in this type of economy, you don't use only the demand, management process, like the policy rate,
Right.
interest rate. You should supplement that, So I will certainly agree with you that we should also be targeting the key sources that drive our inflation. For instance, food. And this is the time that I would have expected that, government will be intervening. Maybe we kept some buffer stock. That's what we should be doing that. And then when it comes to fuel also, we are seeing a very big shock with look at where fuel prices have risen to.
That's right.
And you can't pass it all onto the economy because the economy can't withstand that. So again, what does boss do? I thought they should also be keeping some stocks.
Strategic reserves.
Strategic reserves, as they do in the US, for instance. This is the time that you should be releasing some on a temporary basis. You can't do that on a permanent basis, okay?
That's right.
But this is the time. And then also, I hear that there's this ESLA, energy
right.
sector, levy, and then there's a stabilization fund or something
there's a
that
price
has been building.
stabilization
The price
And the
stabilization.
recovery levy.
I'm talking about the price stabilization
Yes.
aspect of it.
That's right.
And people have said there's accumulated some funds in that.
That's
in
true.
that. So government could also use part of it to cushion domestic prices. And then also, in the budget, government use a benchmark estimate, for oil prices. Because government also earns income from oil.
That's
We
right.
produce some oil. So they use just around $60, dollars to a barrel in the budget. Now, oil prices have shot beyond $100, dollars. So government is making gains from there. Government could also use part of those gains also to subsidize us, for a while, because this situation may not be there forever. Do you get me? It's due to some geopolitical, conditions and situations, the war in Ukraine and all that, So one day the thing will turn around. Okay, so this is like some temporary intervention measures that are needed to cushion the situation.
In fact, the president and the cabinet and the party leadership have been meeting in Yase, and the finance minister is expected to spell out the details of the measures they have adopted to cushion the Ghanaian against some of these hardships that you have identified and which we're all facing, and then also how to revive the economy in the short to medium term. So these are some of the cushioning you expect, especially for fuel prices.
Yeah, when the minister comes out with the details, these are some of the measures that we expect him to announce. I understand he's going to do consultations with major economic and social stakeholders. Maybe that will include the CSOs, I believe, as well. So we'll have.
But when you talk, do they listen? I mean,
well, I don't know whether directly, because when I issue, these my statements.
For example, like this one.
Nobody approaches me directly from government and says, and maybe or invites me for further discussion or that. That one I don't get it. But I am sure that it goes out there, and some of them they see it, because I saw a Gabi Ochedakun tweet that, we have made a very good
said government
good IEA
presidency.
We have made very, very good suggestions. But he's also saying that government has already taken measures, to reduce its expenditure and so on, and that he's blaming even the MPP for not doing their PR, well.
Let's go into the details of some of the things you talked about. So, for instance, now we are hearing that there's a possible injection of some $2 billion into the economy as a way of addressing the depreciation of the cedi. Is that going to make any difference at all?
In fact, when I hear that, I'm asking myself first, where is it going to come from? Okay, the headlines or everything, everybody is saying, the president says they are going to pump $2 billion into the economy. So my question is, maybe they'll come out, where is it going to come from?
Where is that money going to come from?
Exactly. Now, the minister has said that our access to the international bond market is now restricted, especially exactly because of the policy credibility issue that we have here. You know, so I ask myself, is it going to be another euro bond? Do they now see that they can access the international and get some euro bond? Okay, but even talking about euro bond, I have always had a problem with go, and maybe that's partly why the cedi has depreciated so much, because we have not been able to bring the usual euro bond. But maybe by this I would have brought in about 3 billion to support the cedi. That hasn't come. Okay, and but I have a problem with using, loans, borrowing to support your cedi. Do you get me? Because one day the reversal will take place. I mean, you have to repay the loan.
Sure.
And then the pressure will come back on the cedi.
So
it is not a sustainable way to do it. The sustainable way to keep your cedi strong is to do something about your exports. The 2 billion could be coming from the Bank of Ghana reserves. That's of course, if either the international market, you go and borrow, or Bank of Ghana is also sitting on 9.5 billion, reserves. You can dip into it. If you dip into it,
but there certainly will be at a cost.
Yeah, but of course, as I said, there's no measure, no action that you can take in this world that the cost will be that Bank of Ghana's reserves. The whole international community knows Bank of Ghana's level of reserves, 9.5 billion. Okay, if you go and dip into it and you take out 2 billion, we know it is at 7.5. You see, the thing is, can you face the market? The market could speculate against you, and they know that your reserves is just 10 billion. It can run out. The thing is, can you face the market? Or when the market they can speculate you. I mean, they can go on speculating. Do you get me? And then you throw. It's also advisable to throw all your reserves after to protect your cedi, because that is also not sustainable. Okay.
That's right.
So, in the interim, if we are talking about maybe finding some, money to cushion the cedi, well, I think it will be because of the situation that we are in. We need to take some such action. But I'm wondering. We don't even the oil. We don't have much reserves there. In terms of stabilization fund or something like that. We don't have much reserve. But this is the time that we should be looking for such stocks, reserves or funds.
That's right.
To cushion the system a bit. Okay. So I am, waiting to hear from the details where this 2 billion is going to come from. Is it going to be euro bonds? Is it going to be dipping into Bank of Ghana's reserves? And how sustainable will that be? Because 2 billion, if the market is speculating against you, it won't last for 2 weeks.
It's Business Focus on TV3, and we're having an exclusive interview with a Director of Research at the Institute for Economic Affairs IEA, Dr. John Kwakye. And as I stated earlier, he understands the workings of the economy, having worked for over 20 years at the Bank of Ghana at various senior levels, and it's on record that he indeed is or was the immediate boss of Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the Vice President and the head of the Economic Management team now, and also the immediate boss of the current Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Addison, and went to the IMF as well to work for over 10 years in various capacities at the International Monetary Fund, where government doesn't want to entertain the idea of going for policy credibility or any form of support. They've made a few recommendations on what government can do to avoid going to the IMF. Doc, you were talking about, in fact, one of the responses to some of the recommendations you made is that, like Gabi Ochedakun said, government has already, the presidency has taken a 30% cut in expenditure. The finance minister had already put out that some 20% expenditure cuts was going to be seen across board. We weren't given details as to where exactly that 20% expenditure will be applied. But you made some recommendations in there. Where should government be taking a look at? Sides of government and a few others.
You see, the economy, the international community, they need some signaling from government that we are in a crisis, we take it seriously. We are asking everybody to tighten their belt at this time. So we are initiating that. It is important that you signal. And that's what I'm saying, that they should do certain things. Could you imagine that recently when the president went to Dubai for this Expo 2020, and then we heard that for the first time he went on a commercial flight.
That's right.
It was symbolic, but people said, oh yes, maybe this is the beginning. Okay, this time exactly signaling, exactly. So those signals, they are important for people to pick. So that's why I said I'll come out and say, look, me and my government and my ministers, we have sliced our salaries by 20%.
You want a salary cut?
Oh yes. Signal that. It may not be even that significant to affect your pocket that much, but just the symbol as a symbol. Okay, and then of course the MDAs. I have gone down to talk about even ministries and the ministers. Of course, I put these things out. I know that politically, the government may not even want to go there, especially when they are in their second term. They have announced the full complement of their ministers, and is it the time for them to cut back? But if you have to do some reshuffling and restructure and
merge some
why not? But so me, I have put it out there, whether it will be taken or not. In fact, the IMF, I know that they don't normally want to go down to that kind of level and tell any government as to how many ministers. I've worked with the IMF. They tell me that that is politically, they leave it to you. They will tell you cut your expenditure, maybe in other areas.
Then it's left to you to identify.
Exactly. They won't say reduce the size of your government.
But you want government to consider that.
Yeah, because yes,
the size of government is too big for our current situation.
Exactly. It's been too big from their first term, 125. They came down to now 86, and even the 86. Because some of these ministries, could be combined. Do you get me? Why do you have Ministry of Transport and Ministry of Railways? Right. In fact, there even used to be a Ministry of Aviation.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. Now you have agriculture and then fisheries. Do you get me?
Yes.
Why can't we combine, some of these? So I believe that when you do that, at least you cut down on the size of government, reduce, government spending. Already, the public sector has been expanding, too much. When we added on 16, regions, that's further expansion of the public sector. People are even talking about creating more districts and more constituencies and more parliamentarians. So you have the public sector just expanding in size and then consuming all our revenue. I've also talked about some of the government's policy initiatives. Okay, of course they had to introduce these initiatives and announce them before during the elections, because you see what politicians do is that they will always find a means of whatever means they will use to come to power, they will adopt it.
That's right.
Then when they win the power, then they see the practical the practicalities of implementing those policies. They confront them. The reality confronts them. Okay, but they will do everything. They will say everything, to come to power. So I believe that most of these promises, one district, one factory, one constituency, $1 million, one village, one dime. Nursing training allowances, free nursing free teacher training allowances, NAPCO, free senior high school. Do you get me? They are mostly, some of them are populist, policies, measures that you want to introduce to make people make you popular, okay, with the electorate. For instance, the senior high school is consuming a lot of our resources. The senior high school. Maybe government didn't anticipate that it would be so expensive. So what stops government from saying, oh, of course, this is a good policy. I want to help every Ghanaian to have education, okay? But having implemented it maybe a couple of years, we realize that, the cost is becoming too much, okay? So maybe now we can accept that the government will pay for tuition and maybe accommodation, but parents, can you provide your food and then, uniforms and you cut those down. Do you get me? And a lot of people will be prepared to do that. Of course, if there are a few people who cannot afford anything like that, you can select them and then provide it fully for them. Okay, but if me, Dr. Kwakye, I can afford to pay for my wards, why do you prevent me from paying?
Well, the finance minister made this point right at the beginning of the implementation of the policy.
Exactly.
And we are confronted with the reality
now. And then his colleagues, some of his colleagues didn't like that idea.
Precisely. So do you really believe that even though we're in a dire situation, we're in a crisis, as you have said, these measures make economic wisdom? It's economically wise to go on this path.
Yes.
And prudent to do this.
Yes.
But politically costly. Will government swallow the pride and take these bold measures to save the economy?
Well, that's really not a question for me. You see, I am speaking as a professional economist, okay? I'm not a politician, but I'm sure that when you give this to the politician, he will try and find a way of doctoring it a bit, because some of them, if they should implement them, will certainly make them somehow unpopular with some people, okay? But sometimes some people will see it as a reasonable thing that you are doing. You also get people to support you. You get some people to be against you, but you also win some support. It's like the regional minister, Accra, Greater Accra regional minister, again, when I go back to him, those measures that he's taking to, clean up Accra, you get a lot of enemies. But the majority of Ghanaians, I think, are behind him. Do you get me? So that is what I will look at. And then the president also, this is your last term in office, okay? So you can take some of these bold measures. After all, you are not going to contest elections again. Did you get me? I'm not saying that
party will.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that because you should do things that will damage your party's chances and all that. But sometimes I think the politics is too much. The politics sort of overrides the economics. That's why we see it, and that's what to me sometimes as an economist, professional economist, is worrying to me when I know that these are the things that can be done, to improve the situation, and the politicians are refusing to do it. When you go to the taxes side, I have the same issues there. We are not collecting enough taxes, and then because of all these several loopholes that we are not prepared to plug. And I ask myself, why don't we want to do it? And when you investigate, you see that it is probably for political reasons that they are not doing it. And I'm asking myself, but we shouldn't be running an economy like that. You see, the politics shouldn't take over from the economists.
Why has the IMF been demonized so much? Going to the IMF is not an option on the table. I mean, why? We've been there a number of times.
Yes, but the IMF in general has not been very popular, not only in Ghana, in developing countries in general, and especially in Africa, because we don't have good examples to show that, because of IMF's involvement in a country over a prolonged period of time, this is what they have achieved, and this is what we have to show for it. Even Ghana, I think there was a time, I remember, for a brief period when Ghana was touted by the IMF and the international commerce, the star of Africa and all that. You see, when we were listening to them and adopting their measures, and maybe we did slightly better during the time. But on a long-term basis, we have gone to the IMF already 16 times.
16 times?
Yes. If we should go, that will be the 17th time. Then
Wow.
you ask yourself, what do we have to show for it? This economy remains virtually like a colonial type economy. We're producing, primary commodities, unrefined. We don't add enough value to it and all that. 65 years after independence, it's like we haven't changed that much. But we have been to the IMF 16 times. So the question you ask is, what has that? How much benefit have we derived from the IMF? The IMF, you derive very short-term benefits in the sense that they will help you stabilize the current, conditions that we are in. They will help you.
That's right.
Because they give you policy advice, strong, bold, tight policies that if you implement, and then also the credibility. You see, there's something in economics we don't model it well enough. In other words, confidence. You see, because if people lose confidence in your economy, they will do things that will bring you down. In the international community.
That's right.
So that confidence, that you regain, or the policy credibility that you go to the IMF, you gain. Probably that is the most important aspect. And then the IMF acts as like an external anchor. If every economy needs some kind of anchor, you can generate it from within yourself. But if you can't do that, then you go and obtain it from externally. And the IMF provides that kind of anchor. And the whole international community, investors, they believe in the IMF that, if you've gone to the IMF, then we know that they will discipline you, they will stabilize the situation, our investments will be safe, your debt that we are holding, we know that, they will place you on a sustainable path that you'll be able to repay us. Do you get me?
Right.
So that restores the confidence. And then the run on the Cedi, the disinvestments, or somehow, stabilize.
But unfortunately, we know that these are the things we have to do.
Yes.
And this is captured in your document.
Yes.
The same things the IMF will tell us to do is what you have suggested.
Yes.
But because we don't have the political will to get it done, we need somebody to hold a cane over our heads to whip us into line, to do the necessary things.
Yes.
That's what the IMF is going to do.
Yes. But this government, when they came into power, I think we were in an IMF program, and they decided, they were determined that they will end the program, and then, it's not something that they were going to renew or extend beyond the expiry date.
That's right.
And they were firm, and they managed to do that. And they themselves, if you remember from the beginning, tried to introduce some fiscal discipline, measures, including they themselves passing the Fiscal Responsibility Act. It had never happened in this country before that, we will make sure that, the budget deficit does not exceed 5%. It is the law now. And you could see that they were working towards it. There was no question about before COVID. They were moving towards the 5% ceiling. Then COVID struck. Okay, but even before COVID, we had also they had inherited this large energy debt, which was also causing some fiscal, problems for them. And then also the financial sector bailout. These also created additional costs, for the budget. Apart from, COVID also coming in, and what COVID did was to increase expenditures, COVID expenditures, because we had to provide for so many businesses and people and so on. And then also it affected revenues because businesses went down, so government couldn't collect enough revenue. So then the deficit ballooned, shot up, and then they had to suspend the Fiscal Responsibility Act. There's a provision in it which says if there's a major shock, the finance minister can go to parliament and say, I've suspended the act.
That's right.
So that's what they did. And now they are trying to return the budget back to within the fiscal responsibility and over the medium term. If you look at the 2022 budget, that's what they are trying to do. 7.4% deficit this year, then it will come down to, I think, 5, then 4.5, then 4.2.
That's right.
Then they would have come back within that, you know, the ceiling, okay? But then we are also facing this immediate crisis. So if we were to be able to deal with this immediate crisis, okay, then maybe over the medium term, I think that is what the president seems to be saying, that we can rebound, okay? Mm-hmm. It's a matter of time. We are facing, you know, maybe temporary kind of difficulties, but the long term, I mean, there's hope we can rebound. You know, I mean, that's how I see it. But we have to deal with the immediate problems also. Yes.
Look, finally, before we go, you've touched on almost all the recommendations that you made.
Yeah.
But if, for instance, the finance minister says, look, the payroll is full, mm-hmm. He also admits that we are broke, even though all the unions are demanding more money. Should government, in an event where you are not able to have the discipline to go by some of these recommendations, consider going to the IMF?
Yeah, but when you go to the IMF, you know, the IMF doesn't give a big financial assistance. I mean, the last time, our 3-year program spanning 2015 to 2017, you know, we received just under $1 billion from the IMF over a 3-year period. And I remember, you know, they dispersed it in installments, and over several installments. And I remember some of the installments were as low as $114 million at a time. That is not a lot of money, okay? So the IMF, going to the IMF, you are not going to get a lot of money, not even to cushion the Cedi. Do you get me?
That's right.
You won't get more than, at best, maybe now, maybe 2 billion. That's all that you may get, but it will be spread over maybe 3 years. Okay, that's not what is going to cushion the Cedi for you. But what you get mostly, as I said, is the policy credibility. That's the, you know, if you cannot create it, build it yourself, then you have to go to the IMF and get it from the IMF. Okay, so going there, if the government should decide I'm going to the IMF, I would see it as an admission of, look, like we have failed. In other words, we can't discipline ourselves. Something that you said when you took over, that no, we can discipline ourselves. We are never going to go to IMF, you know, again, because we know how to do it. Mm-hmm. So now you go back, you are now going to admit that no, of course, you will say that maybe COVID and geopolitical events have changed things. Maybe that's how you used to rationalize your going to the IMF. I don't know whether, maybe, because I thought I heard that the government, I mean, going to this crunch meeting, I thought they were saying that everything was on the table.
Yes.
That's what I heard, including the IMF.
Yes.
So they didn't rule out going to the IMF, and I was surprised even to see that the government had put that on the table, you know. Yes. So we're still waiting for, so far the statement that we have heard from them, from the Minister of Information and so on. Have you heard anything to the effect that, oh, they've ruled out going to the IMF?
No.
Okay. So that could still be part of the package that they said they will announce the details. It could still be there. And then since they said they are going to consult, mm-hmm. maybe some of the stakeholders they will consult may urge them. So it will depend on the balance of, you know, where the decision, I mean the opinion will be. Maybe should we go? If there's a strong opinion that we should go, maybe they will buy into it.
Dr. John Kwakye, I thank you so much.
I also thank you very much.
Dr. John Kwakye is the Director of Research at the Institute of Economic Affairs IEA, talking to us about not only the statement they released containing recommendations that government should, in their view, pay attention to if it doesn't want to go to the IMF, because those recommendations are almost all what the IMF would tell government to do. But as to whether there's that political discipline and the will, the commitment to do it, is another question altogether. Although these recommendations are economically prudent and will revive the fortunes of the economy. But we'll wait to see in the coming days what the finance minister will tell us after that crisis retreat over the weekend. Thank you very much for staying with us here on Business Focus. I am Alfred Okansi.